Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Let's see how long it takes to get good old Max's channel shut down. Talking about all this stuff. Looks like it's running. Do I have audio? Yes, I do have audio. Oh boy. Greetings and welcome all. Today we're going to talk about privileges. Privileges and terms of service, terms of use, and how that relates to organizations out there like the military. Now, right now, of course, they're trying to push through COVID vaccination. And to my knowledge, everything is still experimental. And of course, they do all this stuff to the military first. And right now, apparently, they're pushing through where they're starting their vaccinations of the military people. And they're saying, you have to do it. You have to do it. Everybody's got to do it. So now we'll talk a little bit about that. And, of course, keep those people in your prayers who don't want to take the vaccine. They're going to go through a whole bunch of mess, right? Just like anybody who refuses any sort of vaccination for school or for where your job is, you're going to have to go through the fire. There is no, people ask me for advice on this, and there is no like, it's going to be okay kind of thing. I mean, yeah, it is. God's got your back, but you do actually, you're going to have to go through some bad stuff, right? It's not comfortable. Everybody wants to be able to buck the system and to get away with something and then be comfortable and still have all the privileges and all of the things that they got before they did that. And that's not the way the world works. So, oh, we got people up in here. Native soldier. I'm a punk. Yeah, could be. So I'm going to preface everything that I say that I am not giving legal advice. I'm not giving, you can take it maybe as general advice, or just my opinion is probably the best way in how that I look at things. And the best advice is to look at, is it something that you're forced to do? Are you really forced to do it? Or is it you have to do it if you want to have a particular benefit or a particular privilege? Now, with the schools, if you want the benefit or the privilege of having you drop your kid off at school and let the state raise your child for 18 years, if you want that privilege and benefit, then you're supposed to do the vaccinations. Now, what's different with the public school system is the fact that you are paying for that. So you have a little bit more say in what they get to do. But say, private schools don't have to let you in. They're not publicly funded, so they say. But it's one of those things where if you want to attend such and such Catholic university, you have to abide by their rules or you can't go there. And it's the exact same thing with the military. It is just a big club. The laws of the land, guys, still exist in the military, more so than actually in the land itself. All right? Because when the military goes over there to old Iraq and they want to go fight a war, well, guess what? The military can't have alcohol over there because the land of Iraq does not allow it. All right? So they actually have more laws and more rules they have to abide by. All right? Doesn't mean that common law and all this stuff goes out the window just because you're in the military. No. But the military provides a benefit and a privilege, 3 hots and a cot for you to be in there. And part of that system is you're going to be vaccinated, you're going to be medicated or whatever they want to give you. And it's like an ongoing open-ended contract between you and the military that says, as long as you give me my 3 hots and a cot, I'll do whatever you say. That's how the system is. So we're going to take a look at what's going on with that. Oh, we got a bunch of people here. How about that? Bunch of new people. Oh boy. Did I awaken the robot army? All the people from the Philippines to come troll? I don't know. Hope not. So we'll look at this. This is most of the references that I have are from military sites. Okay. So COVID-19 vaccine to enter clinical trials. So it is definitely experimental. And this is from 10/14/2020, so a month ago. Definitely experimental 1 month ago. And right now they are giving it to soldiers, which would indicate to me that it is still in experimental phase. Like I could not go to the clinic and go ask to get it without signing a waiver and a whole bunch of stuff, meaning that it's not approved by FDA or anything yet. That would mean it's still experimental. Now, that's a huge difference when it comes to these vaccinations and things in the military. We'll get into that after we read a little bit of the article here. The Army is making progress on its COVID-19 vaccine, is preparing for clinical trials with human test subjects, said in October 14th. Well, the human test subjects then are going to be the military, which is pretty standard stuff for all vaccinations that come out. That's because when you look at it, I mean, it may sound, oh, terrible that they're exposing these people. It's like, look, you've got people that are in there for the privilege of being in the military. Yes, it's a privilege. And you've got, my dog is going crazy and I'm losing my train of thought. Just not my day today. I tell you guys, not my day. Just wanted to surf the internet, maybe watch some YouTube videos. It's just not happening. The Army is making progress on its COVID-19 vaccine and is preparing for clinical trials with human test subjects. Okay, so it is the military that they're testing things on. And it's a benefit privilege sort of a deal. Could you make the dog be quiet, please? I'm sorry, I'm in a really bad mood. You have this benefit privilege thing. Now, when you look at it from, isn't it terrible that they're exposing our young children in the military to all these things? It's like, well, it is the best possible way to actually determine whether or not a vaccine is working or not, because you've got a consolidated group of people where you know exactly what they eat, exactly what their environment is like, and exactly what they do for 24 hours a day. They're the perfect test group to test things on. All right. It is a good group of people to do it. Now, should it be forced on them? Well, according to the law, experimental vaccines cannot be forced. It's an implied consent, and that is a law. Now, what happens in a lot of these, like it's a club, right? The military is a big club where they have their own personal rules they can get away with as long as they don't violate any common law. You can't go rape somebody in the military and get away with it because the military feels like, yeah, it's all right. That's okay thing to do in the military. It doesn't work like that at all. All of the same laws apply. It doesn't matter. They can shame you and they can do this and that and make you feel uncomfortable and lock you in your room or whatever. Sure. But when it comes to criminal things, you can't just get away with that because you're in the military. They have to follow the law. They have to follow Congress. Congress says it's an implied consent if you're doing a experimental vaccine. Right here, vaccine law, biotech law. It was John Doe versus Donald Rumsfeld about having 150,000 troopers over there in Iraq got the anthrax vaccination, which the whole thing behind that was sketchy because the company was basically going out of business until mysteriously envelopes appeared with anthrax in them to Congress members, right? And so they got the okay to go vaccinate a whole bunch of people. 80% of those soldiers got sick. And because it was an experimental thing, all of them soldiers were entitled to benefits, lifetime benefits. And we want to talk about severity and different things where rights apply. Now, when you're talking about something that affects you for the rest of your life, you can't take the vaccine back out of somebody, which means it's a lifetime thing. Yeah, you're in the service, but after 4 years, you're out. Or if you're a lifetime career guy, after 22 years, you're out. Okay. Are they going to take those vaccines back out of you? No, they can't. They need your consent for it. Another example with that would be, why don't we have RFID chips in all the troops? We got them in the dogs. We got them in the cats. They're perfectly safe. Why do the troops not have them? It makes sense. Well, they don't, because they have to take them all back out again when you get out of the service. Okay. It's a similar sort of a thing with the vaccination. So what's going on now here is they're rolling out all this stuff and they're putting the soldiers under a lot of pressure to take the vaccination, which implies to me that they know they really don't have the full go ahead, like an MMR vaccine or chicken pox or one of these ones that they give you to like school kids and stuff. Those ones are all approved by FDA. They've been doling them out for years and years and years. And if you won't take one of those, it's like, well, then there's something there. Then they have a reason to kind of come after you. But if it's an experimental one, they kind of have to fear people into it. Like there'll be fines and there'll be suspensions if you don't do what we want you to do, and which could be the case. It could be the case that obviously if they want to be really hard about it, then they'll Article 15 you and dock your pay, or even drop your rank if you won't do it. But that's if you intend to continue on in the military. My question is for anybody in there, why are you in the military right now? Why would you do that? You want to go into the end times being as part of the New World Order army? Is there any question that we're not the New World Order army? When they talk about the New World Order coming in and kicking in doors and rounding people up, that's going to be you in the army doing that. Why would you sign up for that? But, we're talking vaccines here. I don't believe any of that's going to happen, by the way. I'm just saying this is what people think, is the New World Order's coming and they're going to take our guns. And that's just what people think. I don't believe in any of that. So that aside, yeah, there's going to be consequences if you don't go along with the program. It's no different than if you're the class clown at school or if you're in some other private club. They can treat you however they want to if you're not going to follow the rules. Okay. If I don't want to follow the rules on YouTube, YouTube has the right to kick me off. Of course, YouTube doesn't have any rules. YouTube are whatever they decide the rules are going to be for that particular day. Regarding your particular channel, there is no real rules, but they pretend there is. They pretend there is. So here they're talking about their vaccine deal. Over the last few months, the service has examined other vaccine candidates. They test everything on the military here. And this was a month ago, but it says the service may also participate in vaccine distribution. Surgeon General of the Army and Commanding General of the Army Medical Command. Distribution process will be led by the Defense Department. The Army will execute what the Department of Defense requests to do and assist in any way. So the Department of Defense just decided to test it on the troops. And if you want to be a Army person or a Navy guy or be in the military, then you're going to have to take it. Or you're going to have to go through the coals and go through the fire and deny it and see what happens. Now here, this is what typically in these clubs, right? Because you still retain your rights and they don't want anyone to really know about that fact, what they do to people who don't go along with the rules in the system is they take them out of the group because they're a troublemaker and they transfer them off somewhere, and either they punish them or they insert them into a new group or something. And they say, as long as you keep your nose clean, then you're good to go. Or they'll Article 15 you, or they'll do whatever. But really, they're not going to do just an Article 15 type style thing, more than likely, because they want other people to take the vaccine. As little dissension as they can possibly get is what they're after. So what happens? You got somebody who doesn't want to go along with the program. You take them out and you put them somewhere else where they can't infect the other group of people. So like in the case of like somebody who's in like Iraq who wouldn't take an, anthrax vaccine. Well, they probably would send you home. They probably would take you out of Iraq and send you someplace else where you wouldn't have to take the vaccine. But meanwhile, back in your old group, your old Army fleet or your platoon or whatever, they'd start the rumor mill about how you got kicked out or how this happened to you or that happened to you. So that makes other people believe that they need to do this, that, or the other thing, or they're going to come down with all these consequences. It's all fear-based, guys. It's fear-based. Mind control is just how the military is run. And it more or less needs to be. Um, you know, that's what it is. So, if you're in the military or people in the military, it's up to them. If they want to just go along day to day, not have any problems, whatever, it's no different than on the outside and wearing a mask. If you want to go along and never get harassed by anybody, never fight for anything or never do anything, just go along with whatever the system tells you to do. Okay. In the military, it's the same sort of thing. If you want your 3 hots and a cot, you want money, you want to have room and board, and you want all these things, then you're going to have to go along with the system. And if whatever you're bucking the system for is important enough to you to not have those things, that's what's on the line. You say, this is important enough to me. They call it the hill to die on. This is important enough to me where I'm not going to do it no matter what. Well, at that point, then who cares? Understand, yeah, you're going to go through discomfort. Okay, you're going to go through discomfort dealing with that stuff, and they might throw you out. But at the end of the day, those are the choices that you make. You're right. And at the end of the day, no one's guaranteed a right to be in the military or whatever. Does it kind of suck? Yeah, but you kind of signed up for that stuff. And then I have some laughable stuff because I hear a lot about the punishments, about things where if you don't comply with what they're doing. And my brother is a career military guy, and I've known many people that were discharged from the military, you should say, and the things that caused them to get discharged. Not dishonorably discharged, just discharged. And how the system goes, and this is, my brother was full-time in it like 10 years ago. So since that time, it apparently has gotten even more, I don't know if you'd call it lax, but whereas one time it would be you'd get punished for doing heroin or something, getting caught doing heroin. Well, nowadays it's more like you're going to get an Article 15 for not using the correct pronoun for she, he, it, they, right? Because you got trans people and women and everything under the sun in the military. And if you're being verbally abusive or what is it, misogynistic or hate speech or all this stuff is more or less what the military is turning into. And I realize that this is not all of the military. It's very hard to speak about the military as a generalization because they all are little private groups, depending on your army base, depending on the branch of service that you're in. Everything is run a little bit differently. They have their broad overarching stuff as far as their rules go, but you could be wildly different from base to base, depending on what is acceptable and what isn't. Right. We got all kinds of stuff. Critical mass. I'll take a look at chat in a second here. They should have never done away with the draft. Yeah, I think they figured out the problem with the draft is that because it's not consensual, they're under a huge amount of liability. You have to consent for the draft. And if you never consent for the draft, they have no reason to expect anything of you legally and spiritually. When I talk about like admiralty law and stuff like that, it's sort of like a spiritual law where when I say everything is by consent, everything is by consent. Very rarely are people doing things to you that you really kind of didn't consent for. It's pretty rare. Higher laws, and it's a spiritual thing. They have to tell you what they're going to do before they do it, and you have to volunteer for it. Lee Katola says he's military for 12 years. They're always the experimental monkeys. Yeah. I mean, as far as like probably the biggest difference in the military as opposed to being out in the general population is they can do medical experiments on you and they can say it's for national security. So then they can bypass a lot of laws that way. But there is this protection in here. right here. I mean, this is case law. Congress put down a thing that says you can't just shoot people up with experimental vaccines. You have to do an implied consent. You have to tell them exactly what's in the vaccine. And you have to give them an option. And that, I mean, they're still going to punish you for not taking it. Okay. It doesn't matter if it's experimental or not. It just means that they can't really kick you out. I don't think they could probably bust your rank or whatever if you're not taking an experimental vaccine. But they can make life difficult for you. They can make you work in the kitchen for a month if that's still a punishment. Oh man, they can even make you do push-ups now in the military. Isn't that funny? Army, this is in 2019, 2020, August 27th, 2020. You want to talk about your rough and tough military and about all the punishments that could come down from the military. Oh, they can do whatever they want because they're the Army. No, they can't. Army okays push-ups. Are we getting the picture here that they're not anything other than a bunch of mind control propaganda, rumor mill? Okay. They finally have it that it's okay to order somebody underneath you to do push-ups when they do something wrong. Hasn't that always been the case? According to this article, no. They were operating under color of law that entire time to force somebody to do physical activity as a punishment. Push-ups. Do you still think that they can hold you down and jab a permanent lifetime thing into you, a foreign object, plunge a foreign object into your body forcibly against your will? And there's not going to be legal repercussions. There's not going to be repercussions spiritually. There's not going to be, no, it's just the military can do it because they're the military. Do you believe that's true? They can't chip soldiers. I mean, and there is an article up, we'll take a look at it in a few minutes, where some dude, internet lawyer dude, says, "Oh yeah, they can force you to do that. Sure, they can force you to do that. Yeah, they'll hold you down, and yeah." There's absolutely no documentation that says that's the case. If that was the case, why don't they sterilize all the women in the military? Why don't they temporarily sterilize all the women? Because the number one way to get out of the military is just go get pregnant. Instant honorable discharge. There you go. Wouldn't it make sense to sterilize all the women in your fighting force? Sure. They going to do that? No. They don't have the right. They can't say, well, you signed the military. You signed up. Doesn't work like that, guys. There is, when you think about it, and you think about like the testing that they do for your jobs and things like this. All right. All that stuff is all consensual. Now, like my wife, you don't want to take the test. You're going to have to go through the hardships. They're going to not want to put you on the schedule. They're going to make you wear a mask and a face shield and goggles and all this other nonsense. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. They're not going to make it easy, but it's still consensual to do it. Now, I look at the test now, knowing what I know, is that sticking a stick up somebody's nose to test them for COVID is inserting a foreign object into somebody's body without their consent. They call that coercion, right? Well, you're just going to get fired if you don't do the test. That's coercion. Inserting a foreign object into somebody's body. Could be vaccine. Could be the little nasal test thing they got. Most states call that rape. But, just, But y'all think that's legal? You don't think that's legal? Hey, I'm not here to give legal advice. I'm just saying what makes sense when you really look at it. When you really look at it. We're going to inject you something that we can never get back out of your body once we do it. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong. I personally am one of the people that says the vaccine isn't going to hurt anybody. Okay. I'm on record as saying that. Doesn't mean I'm going to go out and go get one. I just don't think I think that they just want to make the money off the vaccine. And the last thing that they want is a whole bunch of people getting hurt. But they can't help themselves. They gotta put their Marisol in the vaccine. It's just not a vaccine without shooting mercury in it. So obviously you're going to have people that are going to get sick. Is it going to protect you from anything? Probably not. It's a fantasy thing, you know? What can I put in my anus to protect me from COVID? What can I do? Covered that. This is from the VA talking about the anthrax thing, this is very similar to the anthrax thing in a way, in that nobody ever got sick and died from anthrax, and nobody's gotten sick and died from COVID. So it's very similar. VA and research organizations continue to evaluate possible causes of Gulf veterans' chronic multi-symptom illnesses, including vaccinations. So everybody is like, really, they call it Gulf War syndrome because they pumped them all full of stuff. And my brother talked about some of it. And I remember talking to him at the time when he was over there. I'm like, can't you just not tell him you're not taking it? And he's like, well, that's a whole big nightmare that I don't really feel like going through. Now, like I said, everyone's got their hill to die on or whatever. But the easiest way is, if you want to stay in the military and not have anyone look sideways at you, honestly, if you decide not to go along with the system, there's no point in being in the military. They're just going to pass you over for promotions, give you the worst jobs. That's just how it is. And what most people do, when I'm read a couple of articles, and what my brother did is, they give you pills to take, you throw them on the ground. If they want you to get a shot, you talk to the people getting a shot and see how many people want $100 bills to just mark your checkbox to say you got the shot. Money talks, people. Then you don't need to die on any hills. Now, with the ones like anthrax vaccine and COVID vaccine, it's like, yeah, you might be able to pass one round, but these things they're going to want to pump into you like every 6 weeks. They're going to we got to keep the booster going. So you might have to stand on something like that. But if it's a one-time deal, just pay the guy. Just give the guy $100, mark you down, be done with it. If they want to have a COVID pass or something for getting on an airplane, just go get a fake pass, guys. Unless you know that you're going to be fighting the system and fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting. It's not everybody's called to do that. Most people can't even take the stupid mask off. But I won't be able to shop at Walmart. It's like, oh my, you guys are such babies. Not being able to shop at Walmart is more important to you than oxygen to your brain. See, that's what I got to deal with every day here now. So yes, if you want to stand up to the system, you got to decide whether or not it's worth it and understand what the consequences could be and look at what the realistic maximum consequences are for something like this. All right. The real life. Because when you're in the military, it's going to be, they're going to put you in the chopper and dangle you by your ankles until you take the vaccine. Because that's how it is. It's a bunch of kids. It's a bunch of kids. And that's the military. The whole mentality. It is all run by rumor mill and yeah. What's really going to happen? Probably in Article 15. Probably get moved out of whatever post you're at and put someplace else until they figure out what to do with you. And then decide that, the best case scenario with this stuff is that a lot of people don't take it and then they have to come up with a new policy. and make it seem like the military has decided that not all soldiers need to have the vaccine, right? They're always going to make it seem like it's your idea. But if you want something done, you got to fight for it. Gulf War vaccinations. Here we are, the VA. Standard series of inoculations against infectious diseases provided to any citizen traveling to the Gulf, including yellow fever, typhoid, cholera, hepatitis, meningitis, whooping cough. So anybody who is going over to the Gulf, and this was the era of the military contractor. So they made it a thing to where anybody who was going into that area had to take all those things. Now the contractors, in order to work for the job and do the job, they had to take their stuff. Otherwise they'd say, okay, well, you can't work here anymore, which is fine. The military are under a coercion where you're going to get beat with a stick if you don't take it. That's the mentality. It never happens, but that's the mentality. So this is the VA talking about how many people they're paying out benefits to for the rest of their life. Gulf War veterans may be eligible for a variety of VA benefits, Gulf War registry, blah, blah, blah. In here, it talks about 80% of the people that took the vaccine got injured by it. Yeah, I think I'm done with that one. I think we're done with that one. Done with that one. Clear up some of my tabs. So I Googled, forced penetration with a foreign object. You get a whole bunch of sex crimes, but that's what it is. Even if it's just taking a stick and putting it in your nose to get a test for your job or for whatever you got to do with it, that's what it is. If you say no, that's what it is. They're going to hold you down and stick a stick up your nose. Doesn't sound very pleasant. Sticks don't belong in noses. It's not a normal thing. I would even say even swabbing the cheek. It's like, that's not a normal thing that people do. And if the thing is that contagious, right? Couldn't you just test my mask or use a spit cup or something like that? Nope. It's got to be a stick tickling the brain. That's what we need. That's nonsense. It's nonsense. But, even before that, it's like, before we even talk about testing, oh, and the test results are so inaccurate and all this stuff, it doesn't matter. You got to head it off right at the beginning and go, look, nobody is dying from this thing. Why are we testing anybody? It doesn't matter if the test doesn't work. Nobody is getting hurt. And that's where you stand your ground. Prove to me that COVID exists. Prove it. And then you can prove to me that the test actually finds it. And then when you do that, then maybe I'll take your test. But no, they can't do that. So they have to fear you and mind control, propagandate your mind with all of these bad things that could possibly happen to you if you buck the system. And it's all nonsense. Waste a lot of brain power thinking about all that when you just go back to why should you take the test when nobody dies from it? 99.07% survival rate. Now, obviously, in the flu season now, people are starting to die and they're saying it's COVID. Well, 1 to 2 million people every year in the United States die from the flu. And the flu has been eradicated this year. There's no flu cases. But people are dying labeled as COVID. So you guys can figure that one out for yourselves. You don't need me. So we're going to talk about punishments for not going along with the military system. Now, remember, the military system is a privilege. You don't have to be there. They give you 3 hots and a cot, fly you all over the world, give you tanks to play with and train you a skill and do all these wonderful things. And they give you money for college later on and all this other stuff. It's a privilege. So yeah, they want you to take all their shots. If you want to be in the military, accept the fact you have to take all their stuff. If you don't want to take their stuff, then don't be in the military. But it's not easy and it's hard and then people shame me. Yes, that's what happens. That's what happens when you go against the system. It doesn't matter any system. It doesn't matter if it's the schoolyard playground system. You go against the system, you're going to get flack. So let's look at, this is the basic Article 15 is a disorderly conduct charge for the military. This would be considered a petty misdemeanor. So your speeding traffic ticket, where there is no jail time that you could possibly get, is basically your Article 15. Article 15 says they can segregate you for 8 days, which to me says you get to stay in your room. Doesn't mean you're going to a prison cell. I don't know for sure on that, but that's what it kind of sounds like, because there's a difference between that and when you actually imprison somebody, you need to have a jury of your peers, which would be a court martial. So it seems to me Article 15 is around the disorderly conduct measure. And I'm sure there's probably more than they can do with it. Now, my brother is career military. And he has a lot. This is he's in the military from 2000 to, or 90 something to 2014 or 15. And then he was a military contractor. And he used to talk about this, and he was a master sergeant or something, E5 or E6. He had people working under him, and you have Article 15s. Well, if someone just doesn't do their job right, you can give them an Article 15. All the Article 15 does is denote on your record that you didn't do something right. You didn't salute the higher officer. Article 15. There typically isn't anything that accompanies that. It's just a writing thing that says you got a slap on the wrist. It goes into your file. And that just gives them an excuse to pass you over for promotion. I mean, they can pass you over for promotion because you're not a team player or they don't like you. It's a club. It's a club. Eventually it gets to the point where you're like, you can bypass officers and go, hey, I haven't been promoted in like 9 years. What's going on? Right? This gives them something to look back and go, well, you got an Article 15. So this is what it is. Not being a team player, something like that. And they can use Article 15s for a lot of different things. But when back in my brother's day, he said he used to get them all the time. And it just, it basically says, this is our punishment here, your Article 15. Now you're peeling potatoes for the next 2 weeks. Now you're doing this. Sometimes they'll dock your pay and call it a fine, right? And there are really, really, really strict circumstances, according to this, they can drop your rank, which to me seems like you'd almost would need I guess you don't need it, but you'd almost need a court martial for that. But see, these are administrative things. Article 15s are administrative, meaning we set up a policy, we set up a rule, you decided not to follow it. Here's your administrative thing. Now, you get like a court martial, you have to commit some kind of crime. You rape somebody, you're getting court martialed, and you're going to a federal prison. Those are criminal offenses. Stealing stuff, selling military property. These are crimes. These are common law crimes. If it's a violation of some arbitrary rule and regulation and the people don't like you, they Article 15 you. Says he was a bad boy. This to me would be what would fall under, I'm not going to take your stupid vaccine. All right. So we'll look at what are the maximums. We want the maximum. We want to be as scared as we could possibly be about the maximum penalties for not taking their little COVID thing. All right. Reduction in rank. That's a pretty big one. A fine of 2/3 1 month's basic pay for the month in which the offense occurred. Now it says basic pay here for a reason. I know like when you're fighting in a theater of war, you get like double pay, hazard pay, and all this other stuff. So I guess if you're under that scenario, basic pay is probably even less than what you think it is. Confinement for up to 8 days. It doesn't say jail. It doesn't say brig. They'll lock you in your room for 8 days. I don't know. Could be jail too. I'm not sure, but 8 days, that's a vacation. That's nothing. Admonition or reprimand. Well, this is going to happen no matter what, even if you don't get an Article 15. Extra duty for 7 days. Oh, no. Oh no. Instead of working my normal 9 to 5 shift, I actually have to work 9 to 7:30. Restriction of duty for 7 days. Well, they don't want me to go to work. So they do to my wife. Oh, you won't take the test? We'll just take you off the schedule. Right? So there you go. There's your punishments for Article 15. And of course, it's part of your permanent record. Just like they used to say that about your high school stuff. Part of your permanent record. You get suspended. It's kid stuff. It's being part of a club is what it is. Can you appeal your Article 15? It's a disorderly conduct for the military. Now, you want to say that somebody can, or a group of people can hold another person down and jab a needle with an experimental vaccine into somebody against their will. What do you think the punishments are for that? 5 years in prison sound about right? Assault with a deadly weapon? Yeah. These guys aren't immune to criminal proceedings. And I also want to talk about that because people, you should know that you saw it in a movie. A Hollywood movie told you about this, that laws actually apply in the military. It's not just because it's the military. We don't have laws anymore. Few Good Men, Jack Nicholson, Tom Cruise. Okay, you've got Tom Cruise is defending a guy who's being charged with murder for murdering one of his people in his platoon. Couple of people for murdering someone in his platoon. And it turns out that Jack Nicholson, rather than going through proper procedures or discharging people from the service for being totally incompetent or troublemakers or non-compliant like they're supposed to do, Article 15 somebody and kick them out, general discharge. Dishonorable discharge, I think you actually have to do a thing with that, but a general discharge, whatever, just get out of here. All they want is everybody to do what you tell them to do. And you have a dissenter in there, it's a lot easier to get rid of them than doing anything else. Well, in the movie, Jack Nicholson says, well, you're my boys and you take care of him and make sure he falls in line. So the other people in the platoon, to avoid getting punished themselves for what this idiot was doing, they beat up the idiot. And that happens all the time. Now, it isn't sanctioned by commanding officers to do that because it's 100% against the law. They're go to prison for it. And everybody who engages in illegal orders like that goes to prison too. Has Nuremberg taught us nothing? Or A Few Good Men from Hollywood? You can't just beat people up because they won't do what you want. Not even in the military. What would you call jabbing somebody with a foreign object against their will with a poison, with an unknown experimental substance? Seems a little bit more serious than getting, beat up by a couple of guys. So anyways, in the case of The Few Good Men, they roughed him up a little bit too much and he died. And then all the people were charged, and it come to find out that Jack Nicholson, that the base commander, didn't tolerate rejects and wouldn't discharge the guy, so he kept ordering him to get beat up. Okay, totally against the law, but people think that that's the reality of the military, is that stuff like that happens and stuff, and they can totally get away with it because it's the military. It's like, no, it's a common law crime. You can't just do whatever you want. In the case, like I said, the big points are with the vaccine is that it's an experimental thing. I don't know if they're classifying it that right now, but it sure looks it, because I can't get a hold of it. I can't go to the doctor and go get it. Now, without probably not, I probably could, but I'd have to sign a waiver. And it's a lifetime thing. You can't ever take the vaccine out of somebody. So it's like, you got to look at things like that as like, yes, you're in the military and you conform to the things for the 4 years or the 20 years or whatever. But at some point, you're not in the military anymore. To me, it seems like the same sort of thing as like a sterilization. Oh, well, you join the military, you're in the military now. They just decided they're going to sterilize all the women because they all keep getting knocked up and they have to get rid of them. So, in order to stop that, we have a mandatory, mandatory anti-birth pill thing, Norplant, mandatory that. Ain't going to work. But, if you want the privileges of being in the military, right? Army okays push-ups for punishment. Just want to let that sink in, guys. You got one side saying that they could do all this mean, nasty, terrible stuff and hold you down and force you, vaccinate you and all this other stuff. And then you have the military.com says it's okay for them to ask you to do push-ups. Meaning before this came out, it wasn't okay for them to force you to do push-ups. Now, as far as how far the laws go in the military, it's sort of a very, very similar thing to a private school. All right. There is more laws in the military than there is anywhere else. Why? Because the military is in every country of the world. That means that when you're on the military base, you are conforming to the United States rules and regulations, whatever they're operating out of. That is considered American soil. However, you're also subject to the laws of the land. For instance, in Iraq, no alcohol. It's okay in America for you to drink. You'd think it'd be okay on the army base to drink. No, because the army base is in Iraq. So you have the Iraqi rules to conform to. Now, I don't know. It's probably not all of the Iraqi rules, but it is whatever they agree to. All right. So, yeah, the idea that the army can do is above the law because they're the army. They are above the law because of consent. If you consent to all of these things, if you're consenting to whatever they want you to do, then they are. I mean, you can completely do things with your will to that would be considered I don't know about illegal, but be considered like you can't force people to jump out of planes, right? You have to consent to that. I mean, at least now. Back in the day, you probably didn't. But I don't know. A lot of those things are all by consent. It's very dangerous to go do that, sure, but I consented to it. It's how you look at it. Is consent. I think we'll talk about some of these things that have been brought to my attention as far as forced vaccinations and some of the kind of rumor milly stuff. Don't need that anymore. Don't need that anymore. Soldier's lawsuit dismissed after claim she was forced to take anthrax vaccinations that made her sick. So when I'm up here saying that they really can't force anybody to do anything, it's all by consent. Otherwise, they have big problems. 100% beyond 100% liable. Damages, coercion, probably to the family, and just it's a nightmare. So you've got lawsuit dismissed after claim she was forced to take anthrax vaccinations. And you read through this and you find out the anthrax comes in 3 different vaccination plans. And she consented to the first one, got sick, consented to the second one, got sick, and then objected to taking the third one, took it anyway, and then sued the government. Okay, that's consent. I consented to all of that. So, of course, they threw her case out. That's what this effectively says. Armytimes.com. But this is put out there to show that, to try and give the idea that you can't object. It's a propaganda mind control thing. These are put out here in Army Times to make it look like there is nothing you can do about all of the vaccines and all of the stuff they shove in your face. Okay. And it's pretty clear in reading through the article that the person in question here has given consent to the army to take the vaccine. So you can go to the VA and get damages for being damaged from the vaccine, but you're not entitled to anything extra. They didn't force you to do anything. I'm sure that she probably has her signature on the implied consent form. And here's the thing is like when you sign the form and it's a 3-part test, you've already signed the form. You're already set up to take the next 2 shots. Like COVID one, apparently there's going to be a couple of different shots you have to take. Well, if you say I'm fine with taking the first one and you get sick and then you say I don't want any more of it, well, now you're in dishonor because you're going back on a contract. You said you would take it, but it made me sick. Well, you said you would take it. You already signed the paper. It's one of those kind of deals. It's a lot harder to get your rights back after you consent and you give them away. So yeah, I don't want to talk anymore about that. I'll talk briefly about forced vaccinations in the Army because I pulled this up too in doing research. Yes, I researched many hours today on all this stuff. It's the only thing I can find that says anything about actually being able to force people to take a vaccination. And I've determined that it's a lie. And we'll take a look at why. But this guy is apparently some kind of a military lawyer. Miraculously, no matter what search you try and pull up for forced vaccinations, military vax, this always comes up, which is very peculiar, we should say. So I'll read it. This article, let's see. Soldiers often wonder about forced vaccinations. This is a topical concern. This article addresses situations where a soldier has an objection to a vaccination that is not religious. If the objection is religious, there's a different process. So all of these things, they all have religious exemptions and medical exemptions, and you can't use a moral objection, which I think is kind of funny. Is you can't use morality to object to something. It's like, what kind of a crazy upside down world do we live in where everything is okay except a moral? You can't have a moral objection. So it's like you can't object morally. I'm not allowed to have morals. That's how you know Satan runs the world. You can have a religious exemption, you can have a medical exemption, but you cannot have a moral objection. Anyways, if you're given those options, just pick medical exemption. And then when they ask you what your exemption is, tell them it's none of their damn business. If they want to ask again, I'll sue you for 70 grand. HIPAA. That's what you do. And then they say, well, you got to provide something on you. You go, no, I don't. You have an exemption. Are exemptions available? And they say, yes. And then I go, good. Well, I'm exempt. And they'll go, which one? And I'll pick one. It's not up to me to explain to them anything. Now, keep in mind, they might be providing a benefit to you, and you have to live without having the benefit potentially. Different ways of navigating different stuff and how important it is to you. At some point in the future, there will be vaccinations for COVID-19 coronavirus, as with other medications. The Army will likely administer the vaccine to soldiers quickly as possible without proper testing. Thank you for scaring us, Mr. Matthew Berry. Inevitably, the soldiers will wonder if they can refuse this vaccine. The answer is generally that they cannot. Forced vaccinations in the Army is a reality. According to who? Can you go out on the street and hold someone down and jab a needle in their arm? What is the difference between that and in the military? Well, they're in the military. They said. Right, so kick them out. The answer is that you cannot assault somebody in the military just because they're in the military. Point blank. Now, I realize there are special circumstances and special times when things happen, right? Take Guantanamo Bay. You can't even put a bag over a terrorist's head without it being some kind of political nightmare. Do you think you can hold down a 20-year-old girl in an army base and jab her full of COVID vax and get away with it? Or is it just a scare tactic? The governing regulation, no, I'm not offering legal advice. I'm just musing through things in my little brain, musing through facts, Congress, laws, and reality, common law, God's law, and how privilege and acceptance works. The governing regulation of forced vaccinations in the Army is AR 600, paragraph 5.4. If a soldier denies a vaccination, that soldier's commander must ensure the soldier understands the purpose of the vaccine, ensure the soldier has been advised of the possibility that the disease may naturally be present in the possible area of operation or may be used as a biological weapon against the United States, and ensure the soldier is educated about the vaccine and is able to discuss the objections with any medical authorities. There you go. That's what it says. If you deny the vaccine, that's what it says. Your commanding officer needs to educate you. Okay. After the commander does the above, he or she has to counsel the soldier in writing, Article 15, basically, that he or she is legally required to be immunized. Legally required to be immunized. And that if he or she continues to refuse the vaccine, he or she will be legally ordered to do so, and that failure to obey will be punished under whatever. Article 15. There's an Article 15. You get to sit in your room for a week, get docked in pay, whatever. Here's the thing is that once you're not a team player with the system, they're not going to want you there. And you shouldn't want to be there. This is your line in the stand and the hill you're going to die on. If it means that much to you, you're not going to be in the military anymore, because it's just after COVID, then there's going to be the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one. Honestly, for the life of me, why would you sign up for the military if you had a problem with vaccinations? But whatever. We're just going to go through with what we got here. Okay, so we're talking about now the situation of the soldier still refuses. And let's look at the advice that we get from the attorney, the law talking guy. In this situation, if the soldier still refuses the vaccination, the command has one of two options or both. Where is the documentation for that? He doesn't have a hyperlink for that. You think that hyperlink, that would have been covered in AR 600 up above, wouldn't it? Where it talks about the commanding officer has to educate the soldier. Doesn't say anything. The first is not to administer the vaccination, but punish the soldier for failure to obey a lawful order. Right? Okay. Article 15. The punishment could range anywhere from a letter of reprimand all the way up to a court-martial. Okay, Mr. Law Talking Guy says it be a court-martial. But I have reason to suspect that for denying a vaccination is not a common law crime that is against the laws of the land of the United States of America. I could be wrong. I cannot be thrown in prison for denying a vaccine. If I don't want to vaccinate children to go to school, I can't be thrown in prison for that. So why would it justify a court-martial? That's what court-martials are for, is when the crime is significant enough to send somebody to prison, federal prison. So this is fear tactic nonsense. My determination, I'm not a legal guy. Listen to Matthew Berry, who has no evidence to back up what he is saying. Soldier who is facing punishment for refusing vaccination has numerous defenses available to him that should be discussed with an experienced military. Buy my cereal. I haven't hired this guy for nothing. He's lying to people. Now, look, this guy, if he is a real attorney and it's not just some bogus webpage, this guy is vying for money. He's not going to give anybody any solutions or tell anybody any of their rights because he wants to get hired. Same as any other attorney out there. How much money can I make off people? The second option is to forcefully administer the vaccination to the soldier. Give me one case. The authority to forcefully administer a vaccination to a soldier is the General Court Martial Convening Authority, i.e., Commanding General. The Commanding General is the one who can order you to be shot. So he's using the same idea that for treason or something, which would still require a trial, by the way, that out in the field you can be executed. And you're using the fact that they can do that to say that they can forcefully vaccinate you. Why would they do that? You decided you won't want to take any vaccines, and they're going to forcefully vaccinate you. And then what is their soldier going to do? What is the soldier going to do now who's been forcefully vaccinated, who now hates the military with all their passion? What are they going to do? Do you think they might not make a very good soldier? Do you think that they might garner sympathy from other people that might be aware of the plight that soldier is going into, where you start to have a little bit of mutiny going on? Wouldn't it make more sense that they would just discharge that soldier as opposed to going through all of the hubbub of having a big thing, especially with social media being so prevalent? And I will say one thing about that is that it's very hard to find out the truth about military circumstances unless people write books, because it's very heavily scrubbed. Very, very heavily scrubbed what's going on in the military. And their claim is going to be national security. That's why Google and all that, they have offices in the CIA building. For people out there who are unaware for the last 20 years, Facebook, Google, probably even Twitter, they all are all part of CIA, because all of these social things are all part of national security. Everything you want to find out about this stuff is scrubbed. So you have to use logical conclusions based on the laws that we have, the laws of the land. Right? And of course, terms and use and conditions and benefits and privileges, which is what the military is. Benefit privilege system. All right. You feed me and take care of me and train me. And should the situation arise, I'll go off and go shoot guns at people. It's pretty much your situation. Forcefully administer a vaccination to a soldier. You understand that they can't do that to people that are like terrorists in Guantanamo Bay. They can't do that to any sort of prisoner of war or anything like that. Why would the prisoner of war have more rights than your average American quote unquote citizen? Why would the prisoner of war have more rights than a soldier in the army? The answer is consent. They don't have any more rights than you have. They don't have any more rights than the people in the army, but it is by the definition of them being in prison and not being allowed the freedom of movement, they don't consent to anything. People in the general public consent to everything as long as it gives them more lollipops. All right? As long as it gets them a bigger boat, a nicer house, more lollipops, they'll consent to whatever they got. The authority to forcefully administer a vaccination to a soldier, we talked about that. This is a responsibility can be delegated if he or she determines there is a threat of naturally occurring disease or use of biological weapons is reasonably possible. A soldier may be given a vaccine against their will. So it's these very specific terms. This guy says, this random internet person says that, if these conditions are met, that we're under biological attack, then it's reasonably possible. Then they can use force to administer the vaccine. And then it says, if a soldier finds themselves in this situation, they should immediately contact a lawyer. And you click that, and it's this guy. Because the command must have completed the steps above. If they did not, there should be consequences. The steps above are, it goes to the commander of the base or somebody who can authorize somebody to be executed. It goes pretty far up. And in the terms of something like that, they can forcefully vaccinate you. And if you're getting that far up where the person actually has the authority to do capital punishment sort of things, which hasn't happened in like ever that I'm aware of. Maybe back in the 1800s or something, there's actual capital punishment. But no, everything's all jury stuff. But it's the maximum fear. Now, that's what we're going for when we're trying to make money, is maximum fear. And I'm not making light of any situations that anyone could be going through. Nobody wants to deal with this stuff. I don't want to wear a mask. I don't have to deal with any of that. I don't think people should be forced to have to take vaccines, but I understand that if you're signed up in the military, that's what you're going to have to do. And if you don't want to do that, don't sign up for the military. But with the people that are in there now, you have to decide whether or not you're going to stand and die on that hill. My suggestion is always go the easy route and just pay somebody off. Just pay somebody off. If it's a recurring thing and you don't want to be in the military anymore, then take your Article 15 and wait for them to discharge you. I don't know anything about the vaccine or what's in it because there's too many goofy stories about there about how it's changing your DNA and it's the mark of the beast and it's this and that and it's all so fearful and terrible. And it's like, it's probably just saline solution with some thimerosal in it. Don't take it. So we're worried about what the military can do to people. Let's take a look. Now we're in 2019 or 2020 or whatever that article was, where now it's officially okay for them to ask you to do push-ups as a form of punishment. All right. It's officially okay now. Never was in the past is what that means. 8 military punishments that wouldn't fly in the civilian world. All right. Food denial. Oh no. Oh no. You mean they'll give me diminished rations if I mess up? Wow, sounds pretty rough. Sounds pretty rough. Must have had to have really beaten someone up pretty badly to get that. Forfeiture of all pay and allowances. Oh no. You took away your allowance. Never in any danger of losing your 3 hots and a cot, though. Just your play money. Okay. Confinement for naughtiness. They can lock you in your bunk or your house if you have a family. Oh, no. Hard labor without full trial. Well, if you want to do it. Hard labor, if you look at that like cleaning the bathroom. Okay. Searched without a warrant. Oh, no. Public shaming. This is by which way 99.9% of everything is done in the military. Fear and shaming. And forced to eat MREs 3 times a day. Oh, my. Look at how rough the soldiers get it. They get to eat only 3 times a day. And it's going to be ramen noodles and garbage out of an MRE. That's terrible. That's terrible. Forced acceptance of non-judicial punishment. Article 15. And that's on their list of, this is supposed to be surprising, I can't believe it's possible type news. And you look at this list, all of this stuff is done as a regular way of life. And depending on the school you go to, if you go to school or a job that you're involved in or whatever, these are all the same sort of things that everybody has to deal with this. Where if you don't go along with the system, these are things that they do to you without violating any of your rights. Because they're privileges. They're all privileges. I get a kick out of the forced to eat MREs 3 times a day. You can't just eat 1 MRE. You got to eat 3 full meals. Take that, disobedient soldier. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. What it all comes down to, is of course, a lot of people are in the military. Military is a big place, but it is not just like everything isn't corporal punishment, which has not existed in over 100 years, where somebody screws up and they tack them to the wall and then they whip them. Okay. That was done away with a long, long, long time ago. And the time that they were doing that in the military, it was okay for just farmers to hang horse thieves. No trials and no nothing. Just hang them. And that was acceptable. So times are changed. All right. And the people that I know, their personal experiences are from the late 80s, early 90s in the military. And then my brothers would go up through like mid 2000s or so, and talking about how the military works and in dealing with it. And from what I understand is that things have gotten more SJW in the military, to where it's a lot of people getting calling someone a homo or something would get you an Article 15. And that's a more serious crime than stealing something. It's all about social justice and acceptance, and they're all wearing masks, and that whole bit. From what I understand, it's in very sad shape. Now, when you want to talk about like punishments for things, if you're worried about what they're going to do because you just say, no, I don't want your vaccine. I personally know a guy who cost the military millions upon millions of dollars and stopped an entire deployment twice of like 50,000 people because he just didn't want to be in the military anymore. And I probably have told this story because I still can't believe it. And he got a general discharge. Well, what he would do is the ship would roll up. You go out for like 3 to 6 months. The ship kind of floats around and does its tour, and they deploy. You call it deployment. They go out and give air support to whatever little poor country that we're bombing the crap out of that week. And say every 6 months or 3 months or whatever it is, the ship would come back to port. And this is typically in a foreign country. And they'd load up on supplies and everyone would get rec time. And every time they did that, this guy would never get back on the boat. Okay, aircraft carriers have like 10,000 people on them, 10 to 15,000 people. The entire battle group has about 50,000 people between all the ships and all that. So you've got all these things that all head out to sea and drive for a day. And then you've got the guy that I work with who would call him up on the phone and go, I missed my boat. So you either get to turn around the entire fleet, or you got to send a helicopter, or both. And he did that twice. Twice. He got a general discharge. Didn't even get an Article 15. I think they locked him up for a weekend or something like that, with the understanding that they knew he was never going to stop. He was never going to stop missing the boat. And they cannot lock him up because he's not committing any crimes. He's committing administrative crimes. I'm not going to do what you tell me to do. That's an administrative crime. There is no law against that. What the understanding is that this guy is never going to be happy, and he's going to sow dissent among his fellow seamen. And if we let him keep doing this, other people are going to get the bright idea. So they remove him from the ship and generally discharge him, and then he's out. Okay. So when you're talking about somebody who is not going to take a vaccine, it's like, hopefully like a large portion of people don't take the vaccine to the point where they won't make it mandatory. They'll have to figure out what they're going to do with people who don't take it. But if it's usually only a handful of people that won't take it. And what they're going to do is move you someplace else so you don't infect the people And they use that term like you're not, like you're infectious, going to give them some sort of illness. No, they don't want your free spirit infecting those people to make them not follow orders. You can't have that spirit of rebellion, right? So they'll move you someplace where you can't infect people with that spirit of, hey, she's getting away with not doing what the Sarge said. And then people start getting ideas they can do that too. That's what all of these in-group things are about. All of it, private school, it'd be military, being whatever. You get somebody in there who sows dissension, they're going to tell everybody we had to remove them so we could take them in the back room and strip them down and put them in the cell and not give them any food or water for 2 weeks after we dock their pay. And then we're going to throw them out of the military. That's the story that people are told. In reality, you go in there and they go Article 15 and they say, do you want to be in the military anymore? And you go, do I have to take vaccines? And they go, yep. And then you say, nope. And then they general discharge, boom, off you go. Do I know that for sure and for a fact? No. But that is the impression that I get from the people I've talked to who have been discharged from the military, is once they understand you don't want to be there anymore, you're no longer a valuable asset, you're a liability. And they want to cut you loose as quick as possible. And if you're not doing a common law crime, you're not stealing from stuff, you're not beating people up, assaulting people, raping people, murdering people, you're not causing a real crime, they just want to get rid of you. Now with COVID, it's a political situation. I don't remember anthrax vaccine being a political situation. COVID is 100% fantasy, mind game, political thing. So there's probably going to be more involved in that. But looking at the realistic punishments that somebody would do for refusing the vaccine, it's going to be Article 15, docking of pay, as you're looking at your maximums, right? Or if you say that you're never going to take their vaccines anymore, they're just going to get rid of you. That's the logical thing to do. You have to look at things logically and not get all, oh my God, I can't believe that they're going to do this. This is terrible. Oh, all the people just settle down. You know, no one said it's easy, but it's not all that bad. You've been through the fire like me. I had plenty of them calluses where it gets a little easier to deal with stuff. But you're always going to keep in mind whenever you're looking at not going along with what the system wants you to do is how far are you willing to go with it? And do they even have the right to do any of that stuff? Or is this a thing where you're consenting to it for a privilege? Now, if you're in the military, you have to consent to it if you want the privilege. If you're a troublemaker in the military, it's not going to fly. You need to get out of there. That's it. You can't be a troublemaker at all. If I was a military commander, I wouldn't want somebody who wouldn't go along with the system in my group. You sow the seeds of dissension. Not what you want. So you have to understand this from their position too. All right. It does not benefit them all to strap somebody down and inject them against their will and then send them back out into their platoon. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Again, I'm not offering any legal advice. I'm just looking at a logical perspective. As if I'm the military and what I'm doing, I want you to do something. I'm going to make it hard for you not to do what I want you to do, with the understanding that I can only push you so far. And once you're beyond that limit, then I'm going to have to get rid of you somehow. Ship you off to another deployment, park you off in Siberia, someplace that isn't a very fun place to work, deny you for promotions, whatever. You get the idea. You get the idea. All right. So, we got 10 people watching. I can look at chat a little bit now. So we're talking about disliking the brainwashing of some people. Well, yeah, everyone's brainwashed to some extent, depending on how loosely you want to define the term. I mean, myself included, catch myself in a lot all the time. Part of it is just my personality, but when you're really when you're really, really, really awake and you're dealing with things on a logic level and a moral level, and that's how you force yourself to think about every single situation that comes up, the logic and a moral level, the world becomes way easier to navigate. And this has only been my thing in like the last year. I've learned a ton to the point where I have to go back and reread all of the religious material that I've already read 15 times over and look at it all with that perspective again to try and gain new insights. It's amazing how clear the entire world becomes when you look at a logic and moral based deal. And if you look at what is a benefit privilege relationship with consent, um, and that sort of a thing in a contracting relationship, like in the military, it's a benefit privilege with an open-ended contract, really. And out in the world, the only thing that changes is it's not, you don't have an open-ended contract anymore. You contract every single time that you deal with people, and the contracts are always being updated. And like the contract when you join your job or you get your employment, whatever they tell you you have to do it the day you show up and you agree to it when your first day and you get your uniform and everything, that's what you agreed to. And then when they want to change the rules 5 years down the road and say, well, now as part of working here, you got to take all these vaccines and do all these things, that's a totally different arrangement. That wasn't part of the contract, wasn't part of the deal. So, you know, you got to understand your rights and as far as that goes. It'd be good if Sweden had a suing culture like America does. Here, it's not that easy to sue in case of maltreatment, says Critical Mass. Well, here's the thing, is that you'll never find out about it. Most of the time, anytime a lawsuit makes really big, a big splash and CNN is covering it, Fox News is covering it, it's because they want it to be covered. And for whatever the reason may be. But if it's something like, for a fact, there is all sorts of liability claims for wearing masks. And there's places getting sued all over for that. My governor in my state got sued by Congress. All right. There's lawsuits happening all over the place, but the media is never going to cover them because it doesn't go with the narrative. You only hear bits and pieces of it here and there on places like YouTube, and they're scrubbing them channels like crazy. Apparently, someone was asking what happened to Jeremy. Jeremy got community guidelines flagged on videos that were like 10 years old on his channel. So he says, right? So I don't know what those was or what the deal is with that, but that's where he's been as far as YouTube has been, to where you can't even get into your account. So they're going through, and I don't know why they're not flagging me, because I know some other people. Jeremy, I think, had like 1,000 subs, so he wasn't that small, but I know people who have like just a handful of subscribers and they're getting flagged from stuff that's like years old, and they're going through and doing their purge. And maybe they're missing me because they already put me in this little black box of unsearchability. And maybe they figure I'm good enough over there and they're not paying attention to me. I don't know. But a lot of people are getting ripped and stripped off the internet. And particularly when it comes to military law and things like that, where you're trying to look up some of these cases and things. The only reason you know about the anthrax thing is because it's an act of Congress. You have to be told about that. Yeah. So, and again, nobody wants you to know that it's a privilege and the whole thing is run by fear and propaganda. That's the entire military is. And that's not to say that it's a good thing or bad thing. And, I can completely see where they're coming from on their end. Completely see it. If you win, you get money well, the thing is with lawsuits though, is the only lawsuits that are really actually worth doing are ones that aren't for the money. Because if you go into it for the money, that means that there is a point in there that they're counting on. All right. They're counting on you being after the money, because then they know that that's only how far they have to go. Because if you're only in it for the money, it doesn't matter how much they're screwing people over. Well, we'll talk about Owen Benjamin. Owen Benjamin made a lot of headlines a year ago because he sued Patreon because he got kicked off Patreon for something he said on Twitter or Instagram. And it wasn't even really that bad. But Patreon kicked him off that. And the people that were patrons of Owen Benjamin sued Patreon to say you're defrauding me by taking this guy off for no reason. And because they pay $10 a month to Owen Benjamin, it was because of the way their agreement was set up. So you have like 80 people suing Patreon, and they don't want anyone to know about that stuff. They don't want anyone to know that you can actually sue people. And what Patreon was like, they're just trying to push it out as long as possible so that Owen Benjamin would have to pay more and more and more in legal fees. And then they would eventually say like, well, we'll give you this amount of money to go away or that amount of money to go away. Meanwhile, the principle of the whole thing is you can't throw people off your platform if they're complying with your terms of service and doing everything right just because you don't like what they said on some other platform. That's the whole lawsuit. And at the end of the day, it's costing Patreon tens of millions of dollars, and Owen Benjamin doesn't care about money. Neither do any of the other people that are on the lawsuit with him. And that gets results. Fighting somebody all the way up until the brink and then them cutting you a check because that's all you wanted anyway was just money, that isn't a reason to be in a lawsuit. The reason to be in the lawsuit is regardless if you get anything at all whatsoever, you still want to make your stand. And that's where you need to be. That's the only time that it's ever just really to do a lawsuit. Otherwise, if you're just in it for money, just cut your losses. I mean, sometimes there is a teaching the man a lesson sort of a thing. But I will personally never be involved in a lawsuit. That I'm not doing it for anything other than my idealistic moral stand, right? Otherwise, yeah, you can sue for just about everything because everybody's always the whole country and the entire system in America is based on fraud. All right. So it's not hard to find fraud. Why are there so many lawsuits in America? It's because everybody is defrauding each other all the way down to the money. You know, the dollar bill is fraud. So real estate's fraud. Everything is fraud. It's certainly not hard to sue people. But is that what you really want to spend your time doing? That's the big thing. A critical mass says, unfortunately, the satanic Illuminati don't respect people's God-given rights. They respect them more than anybody else. They respect them more than anybody else. I'm trying to find it so I can tag it. So it comes up on the bottom of the screen like this is a real professional stream. The satanic Illuminati people know way more about rights than your average person. They know exactly what they can do and get away with and how to go about doing things. Because there is, people ask like, how can God allow so much wickedness in the world and so much evil in the world and so much this and so much that? And it's like, it's a contract. God's allowing it because people are choosing it. Okay. God's given us free will. And it's because of his grace that people are allowed to choose their evil and their wickedness and choose to be involved in things and choose to look the other way at something going on because it benefits them. I'm going to look the other way that, I'm buying these Nikes that I know are produced in Bangladesh by 4-year-olds, but I really like my pair of Nikes and I'll pretend that I didn't see that article that they're all produced by 3 and 4-year-old workers in Bangladesh for rice. I'll look the other way on that because I get Nikes and lollipops. I'm not the one forcing them to build sneakers. I'm just buying them. I'm not the one doing it. That's, greater than 90% of the population thinks like that. where they are aware of stuff and just justifies it like that. I'm not the one doing it. And your Satanist is going, I knew you would see it that way. That's right. You take that means a bigger lolly for you. You get a bigger lolly. You don't need to worry about Bangladesh. You don't need to worry about those children chained to the fence in China. You didn't have nothing to do with that. Your iPhone is 6 months old. It's sick. You need a new one. You need a new one. It's all by consent. These guys know it. All the people at the top know it. Why is it when you go up and you want to know the truth about what's the reality of the coronavirus? And you've got a story over here that says millions are dead. And then you've got a story over here that says 99.07% survival rate. CDC says masks do nothing to prevent the coronavirus. CDC says the only prevention is wearing masks. What do you think that is? They're telling you the truth so they can get away with it because you're consenting to it. That way, they don't have God down on them for their karmic infractions. They can't just go in there and round people up and just start killing people, because that would be an offense. That would break the law. That would break the spiritual moral law. But if they go out there and go, look, we're going to run this program where we're going to give you all the food you want, but the food is going to be poison, just to let you know, and about 30% of you are going to die. And you all go, hey, do you like cake? And everyone's like, yeah, cake and lollipops. 30% of the people die. Everybody is happy. They get their cake. They get the population reduction. And God's moral law was not broken. This is how it works. Yeah. Amy, what did you send me? I will have to look at this. Did I get booted off? Is that what you sent me? Or well, you sent me my channel. We'll have to disagree. They do a lot of evil things to people against their will. Well defined, against their will. They do an incredible amount of trickery, an incredible amount of propaganda, and there's absolutely no question that they're really pushing the boundaries as to what they can get away with as far as tricking people and propaganda. Like, there's going to be some kickback from God on that, I'm sure. But the other flip coin of that is they do also tell you. They also tell you what they're doing. I mean, Fauci himself was talking about the COVID test and how that they can manipulate the test to do whatever they want to. And this is the same interview that Fauci said that the average person on the street should not be wearing a mask. Okay, this comes out of Fauci's mouth. And he said that we run the test samples where if we ran it to 35 times, everybody would be positive. And if we ran it 25 times, nobody would be positive. So we run it on average of like 26, 27 times. And that's how we figure out, who might have it. That it comes right out of their mouth. So it's up to the people choosing what they want to believe. And a lot of people want to choose deception. And that's on them. That's on them. Oh, there's only a little bit of poison in this cake. 90% good food. And now look. The other thing too is with this. Now I'm talking about the very upper top stuff. Okay. I am talking about the people who run the governments all over the world, all the way up through Satan and all of the big leaders, the Rothschilds and all them guys who own all the money and all the Zionists and all them guys. And about what they're doing. They need to be on the good side. They have to be in the right contract. Otherwise, God's going to wipe them out. Okay. So those guys are doing, they're doing the Jesuitical this and that and this and that and trickery and a lot of this stuff, but they are putting the true information out. Now, your man on the street or the job you work at or, anything, your state governments, these guys are nobodies. Okay. Yeah, they're gonna have some really wicked things going on there, but that's based on your local government. That's based on more on your local stuff. As far as how the world is run in general, it's consent based. And all of those psyops that they want to do, they're all consent based and they tell you the truth about them. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to get away with them. God's in control. And it's because people ask, why is the government so wicked? Why is the world so wicked? It's because the people are. And I can't say I judge people's character and all of that, but things like this have always existed all through since the creation. All right. Always been some kind of garbage going on. And it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse now, the entire world. But looking back through history, you always had little pockets that would pop up that would be really, really, really bad and really satanic, Luciferian. And now it just so happens that you can't really escape too much from it. And you're going to wonder, how could it be allowed? Right? How could God allow this stuff? And it's like, well, because people are choosing it and it's God's grace. Otherwise, he just wipe everything out like he did in the flood. It's God's grace to allow you to choose your own damnation. That's how I see it anyway. You may disagree. They have conflicts in news articles to cause confusion. Yes. Whatever the news says is generally you don't want to listen to. The only things that I put a fair amount of weight on is when you have statistical data that comes out of CDC. I don't care what the narrative is around it, but if you have just the stats and the spreadsheets, all of that data, there's no reason not to believe that that's somewhat accurate. Obviously, regarding COVID, everything on the planet is labeled COVID. But even still, regardless of them doing that, it still has a 99.07% survival rate. So, and all of those, there's no conspiracy behind that. I used to work in the medical field, sort of. I was an IT person, but I am aware of how those forms, there's a form when every time you go to the doctor, you fill out a form. And one of those is a consent form so that they can use your data, not your personal data, but you as a generic person. And the types of treatments you're receiving and blah, blah, blah. And that's so they can track for census. And this is for the things that go to the CDC and people who do research reports. All that stuff is legit. It's 100% legitimate. I used to work at the University of Minnesota where we created the forms that were the consent forms that we used to have to update in IT that people would sign every time. And I used to make accounts for students to be able to access the medical records for that type of data. Okay. So it's not a big grand conspiracy when they come out with numbers of stuff, because all they do is they go in the database and type in what they're looking for and they pull out the numbers. There's no reason to believe that any of that is skewed. It's the information before it gets in there that gets skewed. The doctor writes down COVID for everything, but the results themselves. So I'll listen to that. I also listen to when they catch people off the cuff. Don Trump, before all of this happened, said COVID is a scam. COVID is a scam and a Democrat plot to try and throw the election. That's what he said. It was off the cuff. It wasn't a professional interview. It wasn't anything like that. So they catch these guys at the truth sometimes. Any sort of formal prepared statement, them in front of a camera, is all Jesuit speak. It's all garbage. Not going to be very much truth. Invading countries and having people killed. Well, I don't know anything about that or the reasons they do that. Obama was a big one on that. contradictory to gaslight and confuse people. Yeah, the entire game is about getting people to react to a situation emotionally and feel like they don't have any control. That's the only game in town is that. Okay. And then in comes government, in comes whoever to say, it's okay. It's okay. I'll take care of the problem for you and I'll make you feel better. And that's the whole game. That's it. So don't freak out. There is literally nothing new under the sun, guys. They'll tell you about nuclear weapons and they'll tell you about bioweapons and all the EMPs or asteroids from space gonna wipe out the planet. And it's all nonsense, guys. Go believe it if you want to. Go believe it if you want to. But it's just a fear tactic to get people to act irrational and to get people worried about everything else other than their own lives and how they're doing. And yeah. We'll see what was true. They're trying to overthrow this election. Shepard's ambassador, who do you think is trying to overthrow the election? Who do you think is trying to overthrow the election? Do you think it's a Democrat conspiracy by Joe Biden? Do you think Joe Biden cooked that up in his dementia ward? You think he cooked that up? You think Joe Biden's got the power to get a whole bunch of people and a whole bunch of fake votes together at key specific locations where nobody would watch and nobody would stop them from counting votes and just adding them to the total without any assistance from anybody anywhere? Who do you think is trying to overthrow? You think that guy is? That whole thing was planned years ago. That whole thing, this whole election nonsense is planned years ago. The Democratic Party has millions of votes just on standby in key locations, in key states, just ready to go, but nowhere else. Why isn't Joe Biden winning in landslide victories in some of these other states? It's only these key places that just happenstance to have nobody watching the vote tally machines. Just by happenstance. It's all nonsense, guys. It's all rigged. The whole thing is rigged. That's why I say, who is overthrowing what from who? The people have always been in power. The same people running the government 20 years ago probably run it today. Danette Lee Packer, COVID was planned years ago. CDC put on a patent on coronavirus in 1999. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, there's some stuff to that, but the fact of the matter remains that corona is the cold. That's what it is. And they can make up all kinds of garbage about it, but what we have dubbed corona for the last 50 years probably is a virus associated with the common cold. Now I say associated with because nobody can prove that viruses make you sick. So you've got that whole thing. But they call it novel coronavirus because it's a new strain. It's new. It's like, guys, read your Bible. There's nothing new under the sun. Okay. Whatever happened to smallpox that killed all them people? All them Indians died of smallpox. Whatever happened to smallpox? Oh, apparently the World Health Organization has the only sample in its lab. It's like, oh, please, what a lie. Whatever happened to nuclear weapons? How come those aren't going off? Oh, I wonder. What happened to these biological weapons? There's nothing new under the sun. Only God creates life. So where do these things come from? They're fantasies. They come from your mind. Be careful for the reality you make, guys. Like I said, the whole game, 100%, is to get an emotional reaction out of people They don't care if you're pro Trump or pro Biden, as long as you're in the game. Which is why I say don't participate. It's the only way you can win. Winning. Danette Lee Packer talking about a national Sunday law. Yeah, you must be a Seventh-day Adventist. Sunday law would be good. I'd be all for it. Watch Danette's head explode. No, we can't have Sunday laws. I know. I used to be a Seventh-day Adventist. I know what you're talking about. But what's wrong with mandating a day where nobody gets to work? Oh, that's Minnesota, where they mandate where if you work at a hair salon, you don't get a job anymore. You don't get to work. If you work at a bar, you can't work anymore. Tough luck. Blame COVID. Don't blame the government. Blame COVID. Don't blame the government. Blame COVID. No. 100%. Blame yourselves. Blame the government. Take people to task on that stuff. Oh, yeah. And Danette, my last live stream I covered Operation Lockstep was 2010, where it was specifically about COVID and what is going on right now. Talked a lot about it, actually. Yeah, everything is planned out in the future. Like I said, they have to let you know what they're doing. They have to. It's part of the thing. Otherwise, God had shut them down. Who are you going to worship? Well, Danette, like I said, I'll be happy for a Sunday law. That was a good thing back when its day, when the Catholics said you're not allowed to work on Sunday. It gave people a day off. Okay, it stopped people. Everybody was on a cycle, and everybody stopped their one day of rest where they knew that their neighbor is going to be off work. Their brother is going to be off work. Okay. Everybody knew what day everyone's going to get together. It's always going to be Sunday because nobody has anything going on. It was great. So yeah, that's what I think about that. I think I caught up pretty much with all the comments. So anyways, keep prayers out to the people in the military that have to put up with this stuff, but, and give them, pray for them. They get wisdom and strength to deal with it. And like I said, I don't have any personal experience or even close family or friends that have been in the military for 5 years, maybe 10. So I'm not familiar with exactly what is going on the street in the barracks now, but it didn't get more strict. I can tell you that. And laws are no different in the military than they are out on the street. There is more laws against bad behavior in the military. So the idea that, they're going to break your arm or something if you don't comply is just it's not the truth. Any more than they're going to break your arm if you don't wear a mask. It's just not true. Now, you may not be able to shop without getting a whole bunch of grief for not wearing that mask. They may say you can't work or you're on a limited schedule or you're on this, and you may have to take people to court over that situation. But, those are not life-threatening deals, whereas potentially taking the vaccine is. I don't know. I mean, I was never aware that 80% of the people who took the vaccine for whatever it is, that biological weapon they say biological weapon, anthrax. I don't think anthrax exists either. What I know about it, I mean, it's like, where is this stuff in nature? It doesn't exist. So I think it's just a big scare play with that. But the vaccines will hurt you. And 80% of the 150,000 people that they gave that vaccine to got damaged from it. And that's like, how is that not major news? Oh, it doesn't go along with the narrative. And then it comes out 10 years later that they're giving out bajillions of dollars to all the people that had Gulf War syndrome because of that, so. And eventually it comes out. You don't want to be in a wheelchair collecting benefits as opposed to just not taking the vaccine, right? Or at least, wait till week 2 and see how the first group of people did, right? Something like that. Talking about blue laws, scare tactics out of China. Hey, China's doing great. They're celebrating 180 days of no COVID and they're partying. They're doing good times, good times. So yeah, that's what I got. And if you know people in the military and stuff, why don't you call them up and ask them, see what's going on and see what they're having them do with the COVID and see what justifications they're doing and see if they have an option in it or if they have they'll never say they have an option. But if they have if they have to sign an informed consent in order to take it, then they do have an option where it may even be against the law for them to be punished for not taking it. I'm not positive on that, but definitely if it's an experimental vaccine, you're supposed to have informed consent. But, who knows? Multiple sclerosis from swine flu vaccine. Yeah, that was another scam. See, that was a scam that not many people fell for. See, right now, as opposed to COVID, we'd have swine flu or H1N1, right? Those were the big scares, but here's the problem is nobody cared. Nobody cared. Oh, whatever, swine flu. Probably because they put flu in the word, right? H1N1 was bird flu, and then they had swine flu. Now, people already are familiar with flu, and they're like, oh, well, that's not a big deal, right? And I think they realized their problem there. So what they did this time around, instead of having a new type of flu, they said coronavirus, the COVID, SARS. And they call it something slightly different that doesn't have flu in the name, even though that's really what it is. Cold or a flu is what it is. Because it doesn't have flu in the name, then people feel a lot more threatened by it because they think they haven't heard it before. And, you can't save everybody. The information is out there. The information is out there. HIV parts in COVID virus. I don't believe in HIV, so. I mean, there's a lot of on both sides, guys. I don't believe in most of this stuff that's out there. And I'm not saying that I think I'm right, but I'm not saying this is how you need to believe. I'm saying look, I don't believe in any of the garbage out there because there's a lot of garbage that is anti-vaccine saying, oh, it's going to rewrite your DNA and there's going to be smart computer chips that are going to reprogram your brain and all of this type of stuff on the anti-vaccinator side. Okay. These are people that would supposed to be on my team, right? Talking absolute nonsense propaganda. And you can't fall into that crap either. That is, again, we're going to drum up your emotions to get you to think irrationally and do stupid things. This is what Alex Jones is all about. We're going to give you something absolutely silly news media article that because some news organization that we know are all liars, like Fox News, CNN, any of these people report on it. And then because Alex Jones reports on it, we're supposed to take it seriously because it came from the mainstream news. And it's like, well, they're mainstream liars. You got to watch out. Or anyone's trying to throw some unverifiable smoke at you. A lot of times they tip their hand because if they're committing a moral crime, it's like, oh, well, that's false. So I look at it. So yeah. Deaths everywhere in HIV pandemic from 1980 to 82 were zero mass. Well, the HIV thing was, I don't remember exactly what the deal was, but it was propagandized into just about everything else that they wanted to blame. They didn't want to fix. After that, it was DDT, I think. No, that was polio. But you got this whole problem where like you apparently like HIV is supposedly a virus, but it was a safe enough virus that you couldn't just catch it from anybody. You could only catch it through sex. That's the only way. And it's like that makes no sense at all. It doesn't. And then you find out that viruses, if they want to say that HIV virus is transmitted that way or coronavirus is transmitted that way, then you have to say cancer is transmitted that way too. And it's like I don't know of anybody catching cancer from somebody else. So that's a whole big medical rabbit trail, and people can think what they want to on that. I'm just saying you have to get everything down to its most basic set of absolute logical truth. Okay? And then that sheds light on everything else. You don't need to be caught up in all of the little tiny nuances of every single thing. Like I'll give you an example of a nuance where, well, the new COVID test, they only take a little stick and they only stick it a little ways up your nose. So there, now it's okay. It's like the virus is nonsense. It doesn't kill anybody. There's no need for a test. So it doesn't matter how far you stick a foreign object. How far you penetrate my body with your foreign object has no relevance. It is still penetrating your body with a foreign object. They argue the length of the needle. That mean rape is okay because the guy had a little wiener? Huh? You know, it's arguing nonsense. You got to argue logic, right and wrong. Does this logically make sense or does it not? Yeah. All right. Well, that's what I got. Like I said, pray for the people in the military and that are concerned about this vaccine thing. And, pray that God gives them wisdom to decide whether or not they want to be in the military. And they're going to continue to take the vaccines and do whatever they want to do and be part of that, or that they can gracefully bow out of that system, right? Gracefully bow out with minimal discomfort, which, is not going to happen. Anytime you go against anybody, people are so afraid of confrontation, they wear a mask at the grocery store, okay? No matter what happens, people are going to be uncomfortable with stuff. If you want to be comfortable, you just go along with the system, put your goggles and your mask on and roll your sleeves up, guys. Do you want to be comfortable? New World Order's over there. Okay. Logic, personal responsibility, and freedom. There's in your Bible there. And you got to live that stuff. Not just kind of look at it and then bat around some theology on the internet with people. You kind of actually have to do it and apply it and look for bigger meanings and things. Anyways, that's what I got. Any last questions? Otherwise, I am definitely out of here. I think I've been going for like 2 hours. 118 minutes ago. Yes, 2 hours. I am finally done talking. Yeah, that's about all we got. All right, guys. Take care and God bless. We are out of here.